Hi, in this week's video we do a fair chunk to do with the Cabane Struts. I remake the mounting brackets. If you can't remember why, or you haven't seen last week's video, have a look. It's links here up in the description. I make the new rear top plate for the Cabane Struts, and I actually get the rear Cabane struts themselves fabricated. I go into detail in how I drill the holes through the Longerons for the mounting of the lower brackets. I modify the control column lower arms, so hopefully get clearance between the forward elevator control tube and the undercarriage carry through. And if that's not enough for you, I also show you how I drill the bolts to take split pins, or cotter pins as our brethren call them across the pond. So there's so much in there. I've put timestamps in to the description so that you know where to look if there's something you particularly want to reference. Otherwise, hopefully you enjoy the video and you're all recovering from eating too much over the festive period. Okay, so I've made up the new bits for the bottom of the control column. As you can see, that's where the whole line is according to the plan, and that 2.5 inches down. I've gone 2 3/4 inches, then radiused it there, so it's a little bit longer. Yes, I know I cut the hole in the floor giving me just the right amount of pitch motion, but I'm going to put a nylon plate over that, so that allows me to adjust that little bit to make sure I've got it right. But importantly, where the rod that goes from here to the reversing lever was 1/16 of an inch clearance against the ply bottom of the fuselage, and there's going to be an 1/8 inch thick section for the rear undercarriage U-channel going across. This will now give me that little bit of extra clearance there, so that when I'm at full range of motion forward and backwards, that tube isn't going to be rattling against the undercarriage. So I want to drill this bowls here to take a split pin. I don't know how well that's focusing, and what I've done is I've twisted the bolt round, having tightened it up to the point where I've got the low section of the thread sort of halfway up the castellation, or slot. Here's a very rough drawing. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. The red lines being the low lines, the grey ones going across here being the ridges. So I'm sort of setting it up so I've got that low line there, sort of in the middle of the height of the slot in the nut. And the plan then is to get a drill bit the size of the slot, diameter of the slot, and just start the hole so on the side of the bolt there with that and that way I've got a good starting point. I won't drill through that size. I'll drill through 0.1 of a millimetre bigger than the diameter of the split pin hole as the usual for what I use. 0.1, 0.2, something around there, so that the split pin goes through. It's not super tight trying to squeeze it through the gap. But I'll do that on the pillar drill. Right, I'm just going to get the drill started here with this 2mm drill bit that I've got here. It gives us a small start. There, a bit like a sort of centre punch. It gives us a small start there for the drill going through, which will be a 1.7mm drill bit, because I'm going to be using a 1.6mm or 1/16 split pin. As you see, I've just just drilled through with this 1.7mm drill, and I used the nut as a guide, but because I put that little start section in, the drill didn't try to wander or do anything mad, and it's come out dead even because I've got that nut there. It allows me to make sure everything's held dead flat. Now when I undo this, it might have a little bit of a burr, but because I've also got the nut on there, that helps to get rid of that. And if it was a really bad one or something like that, you could use a rat tail file, a round file, just to get rid of the bit that was there, but we've got no problems with that one. Okay, so I'm about to torque up these two nylon stiff nuts on the control column. So I've set the torque wrenches, these are 3/16 AN3s, to 25 pounds/4 inches, and so I'm just going to tighten this up. There we go, just bleeping there. The actual specified torques for AN3s, 20 pounds/inches to 25 pounds/inches. With the nylon on these, it's not registering at a peak torque, it's winding it down to start off with, which I can do with this this torque wrench. I can actually measure how much torque it took to get it started. I could add that on, but it's not even registering you know, sort of 1 or 2 pounds/inches, so I'm just not bothering. I'm doing it to the upper, and that way it's going to be slightly less than the upper torque and above the minimum. There's a split pin in. As you can sort of see, I tuck the ends in. It's not a requirement in any of the aircraft publications really, but it's how I was trained. It means that there's nothing to catch, and especially as this is in the cockpit, so you just cut them off so you can tuck the ends of the split pin in that sort of format is the way I was taught. And it also stops the split pin from being able to sort of shake and rattle and roll in there. Well, here are the 6 which I made up to replace the 6 brackets from Fisher for holding the struts, cabane struts, onto the top plates. You can see I've drilled the hole which is where the tube is going to go. I've drilled that just to 4mm as a pilot, but these holes here, these have been drilled and reamed to 3/16 rather than being the quarter, because it's 3/16 and 3 bolts which are going to go through there. There'll be another hole here, which will, the position of which will be determined by partly the angle that the bracket will sit and the position of the plate, to make sure we've got appropriate edge distances. So that's what I've been up to there, and while I was about it, the ones which I am keeping of their brackets, I've rounded off. It says, you know, their front ones, which already have the 2 holes in, I've rounded those off, and the 4 lower ones of these brackets I've just rounded the corners off and things like that. It just makes it smoother in the cockpit, and aesthetically look a little bit more pleasing. Less chance of it rubbing on, having a sharp corner that can rub on a tube or something like that and cause a problem there. So all the edges have been radiused slightly, and I've cleaned them up a bit. Right then, so about to drill this hole here. I'm just going to put a piece of ply in behind, roughly clamped into position, The idea is that that will stop the drill breaking through, and then hopefully I've got that in the position. Yeah, that's out of the way. I can put my brad drill bit through and center that on the hole position. Have that in there. Oops, it says. Trying to hold this so that you folks can sort of see as well. And then I'm going to clamp this guide tightly in place like that. So that is now, I can sort of confirm by looking down through the centre, that's all targeted right the way through. I've got a marker here that's saying it's on the centre line as well. So I can now just drill through right, we're through. Okay, let's have a little look what we've got. So take this off. There's our hole. Take that out of the way. Pull through. Just let me unclip and I'll show you what the hole looks like on the other side. Okay, so it's splintered out a little bit. I'll put some Sino on that, and then I can just sand that flat. It'll be okay. So there it is with that bit glued down with cyanoacrylate, super glue, and just cleaned up a little bit. I think the only reason that split out is because I had the ply backing on, but I think because it was coming up here over the step, it left a slight gap, and that's why it splintered out. I'll just have to make sure I do a little bit better clamping job for the next one. Okay, for this one, I've same sort of setup with a clamp, but I've used a chunk of wood. It's a stop. Let's see. Yeah, that's made a much better support for the hole, so it doesn't split out. So there we go. They're drilled out to the size for the bushing. I've got some little plywood rings to access the thickness for the skin, so I can put the bushings in. They won't be glued, they won't be bonded. I'm just going to put the bushings into place with the ply ring, so I can actually attach the hardware and see what it comes out like. Okay, from the plans it sort of specifies the bolt going through as AN413A, but it doesn't specify a washer there to spread the load. I anticipate a washer to spread the load. Admittedly, the bolt would be going through the other way, otherwise we're going to have this coming out towards the covering a little bit too far, but I just did it this way so I could show more readily. That's not going into safety. I'm going to try an AN14A and see what happens there. As I say, the saying goes, try again. So the way I've got it set up at the moment, let's have a look. This might show you the order of parts. I've got the head of the bolt there with a washer. It's not a standard washer, it's a bit of a thin washer, but it could be a standard washer. I've got the plywood packer there to act the same as the plywood skin, so we've got the right thickness. We've got the bushing in, we've got a penny washer, and this Nyloc Nut. I've got lots of AN4 aircraft grade Nyloc Nuts, so this one's just being used, been backwards and forwards. It's no longer usable, so it'll do for what we're doing at the moment. And we've got enough threads now showing it's now in safety, so I'm happy. I could go to a standard washer and still be in safety, so hooray. So AN4-15A bolts to be used. So with a rule just stuck into the U bracket there, just to see what sort of angle it's coming out at. it's obvious that it's not going to line up with the bit at the top there, and so as I suspected, I will have to just dress back the gusset there a bit to allow that to go a bit more upright. Okay, so the marking blue applied to the plate, 1/4 inch 6082 T6, which I'm going to use to make up the replacement top plates for the Cabane Struts area. And this is a lot. Well, I'm making them bigger to make sure I've got the edge distances, and I may end up trimming them down later to get rid of the excess material. Okay, let me explain where I'm at with the with this plate at the moment, or plates. A set of 3 need to be made. I'm marking out the first one at the moment. First stage was I've made this edge and this edge master edges, so that an engineer's square goes across, there's no gaps, make sure that's absolutely square to each other. And then what I've done is I've measured up this way the 3.5 inches there and at that end of the plate, because I'm going to be making 2 on this plane anyway. So going across, and then drawing. By doing it right the way across, you end up with the least error. So, you know, say it was 5 thou each end, it reduces the overall effect. It's averaged out quite a chunk. So I've marked the total vertical width of the plate and a centre line, fine scribe centre line. I've measured across from this master edge across here 4.25 inches. And the top 4.25 inches, and scribe that for the side to side width of the plate, marked a centre line, and then 20 millimeters either side of that that centre line. I hate this mixing of units of measurement, but effectively that was the most accurate measurement I got going across the holes from here to here with my measuring devices, including a rule. So that's what I've done. So 20 mil either side. So there's one plate effectively marked out. The master edge is all sorted out. I just need to centre punch the point for the 2 holes to go, and you know, for that I will use the trusty optical centre punching tool. Okay, so here's the top rear plate. I've just taken off the engineer's blue, and that drilled through the holes here at 4.5 millimeters, and then reamed them out to the 3/16, all on the pillar drill to make sure absolutely everything is spot on vertical. I rounded the top corners here because they're not going to be modified. The wing will be mounting up here, so I won't be taking any material off the top. There may be some come off the bottom, as the plans will show that, to allow for the landing wire carry through and cables to be attached. We'll have a little look at that when it comes to it. The sort of top bracketry sort of set up. I've just put some longer bolts going through because it's going through the plywood there. There's some nuts. Here's AS4, the rear Cabane strut tube, and a couple of the write-ups I've sort of seen, people sort of said they need to squeeze the ends to get them to fit, but mine just sort of fits in there just perfectly. So obviously something's changed somewhere. I'll mark a centre line on both sides, equally on both sides, and I will put in a minimum land or edge distance mark along here on those, and then I'll offer it up and start chamfering the corner as required to make sure I meet those land distances, so I've got the edge distances there to the hole. Once I've got the bottom end sorted out, I'll then do something similar to the top end to make sure I get it right. So I want to mark a centre line on, or a line dead opposite on each side of this this tube, just so I can use that as a sort of a centre line point for the fixing screw, so I know that they're dead opposite each other. So the simple way for me, I could use V blocks on my surface plate. I thought I'd show you this method, which just about anybody could use. I've got a block here that stops it from being able to roll, and literally using a square going on opposite sides, and it just puts a little polish mark on dead opposite, which I'll now just highlight with a marker pen. Okay, so I've drilled the lower hole system first, so let's just explain what I've done here. So I measured up from the end of the tube 9/16, 3 times the diameter of the bolt being used, and centre punch both sides, drilled it 4.5 millimeters, and then put a ream right the way through from one side to the other, so the hole is absolutely square from one side to the other, nice and easy. And then I put that into the bracket, sort of in that sort of format with a bolt through it, and start to try to rotate this up, find out where the contact point is, and then slowly I've dressed back the corner here so that it will sit at the right angle, something like that, as you can sort of see going into there. Once I made sure I got it sort of sitting at the right angle, I carried on just dressing this back until I could get a 15th thou feeler gauge in all the way along the edge there, so there's actually a clearance between here and the back face of the bracket, 15th thou. That's not specified anywhere, but I wanted to make sure there was a clearance so we didn't end up with any chatter or anything like that in flight, eroding and putting a stress razor in the bracket. Once that was done, I just used a half round file to get rid of the sort of feather edge here, so it's actually got a little bit of an edge, and rounded it off, polished it up as you can sort of see, and I also just rounded those corners off there, just so that you know, as you're putting it in, it rocks as you're putting it in and things like that. It doesn't put a hard corner into the corner of the bracket. Right. According to the plan, the bolts going through here should be an AN3 13A. That's a 14 that's in there. If I go 13, you'll see that it's just too short. I'll just use this bracket next door. Now if I put that through like that, you can see that that has got insufficient for a nut to go on, and a 14, which is what I've temporarily stuck in, goes through. We've got enough there for a nut on, but it's still not really long enough for the job that we want, because if you look at that, we've got thread here going to be inside the hole, and with the loads, because it's taking all the flying loads and everything else, that will eat into the aluminium. So I'm going to end up going to a 15A, and there's still an issue when you go to a 15A, but when you put that through, you've got plain shank going through to the side there, so this will need to have a washer underneath the head, just to put that down to the right position and washer underneath the tail end there for the nut, otherwise we end up with good length of thread sticking through where we don't really need it. So that's going to need a thin washer under the head, would bring it just down perfectly, and a washer under the nut there will be absolutely spot on, I think, so that we've got the nut in safety. This one will probably go through that way, but I don't know if I'm going to have enough room to be able to do that, and it's tilted up into its right position because of the bracket here, that gusset. And for the front ones here, that's going to be, it's got to go through that way because there's just no space to get a bolt through from the front. I'll probably use a small square just so I can get in a little bit closer. I'll mark the sort of centre line positions at the top here, and then I can adjust the end of the tube there so that centre line is showing in the hole there, and then I can pick that up with a drill. On my brackets, these top brackets here, I drilled them to 4mm to allow for a bit of drill wobble and bits and pieces. Of course, at the bottom end it was already drill final size on the bracket supplied by Fisher, so that's why I've put the bolts in the bottom first, because I haven't got any jiggle room. I've got a little bit there now, I can set that up at the top. Okay, I'm hoping that this is all in focus, but you can see, hopefully going down there in the hole, the centre line which I drew up here, as in position there. So I've dressed back the face of the pipe enough for that to sit there nicely, and you come round to this side here. Hopefully again that's showing on the camera that the line is in the centre of the hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this piece of pipe work out of the way, just rotate the bracket up, and I'm going to drill 4mm hole in there, and I'm going to put a gripper pin in, and I'll do a 4mm hole from the other way. So drilled through 4mm, held in place with a gripper pin, and just drilled up there 4.5. I'll put a 4.5 drill just to act as a guide to hold that in position, and I'll enlarge the lower one, take the gripper pin out and enlarge the lower one to 4.5. Then I'll just run a ream straight through from one side to the other at 3/16, 4.8mm. So now the hole's been reamed through. I can cut off the excess off the end there. Just finished dressing back that little cutaway and deburring everything and rounding it off, and that should hopefully then be sorted. Okay, there they are, all cleaned up, deburred, both ends, and as you can see there is sufficient edge distance or land, even with the cutout as it is there, and that gives us our 15 pound clearance between this and the bracket, which was my sort of made up figure, but that's what I decided I'd go for, about 15 pounds. So as long as it's a clearance, and I think that's sufficient so it won't end up with chatter. Well, that's it for this week. Sorry for it being such a long video. Hopefully you found it of use. Next week, hopefully crack on and do a little bit more on these Cabane struts. So, look after yourselves. Bye now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up. You can subscribe or even hit the little bell notification for future videos. Any comments would be appreciated, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Remember, go fly and feel the sky.